All right, welcome to the show. Others receiving votes. Happy March Madness to you. It's on. We don't need to wait till the actual NCAA tournament. This is too much fun right here, right now. I'm Pat Forde, joined by my colleagues at Sports Illustrated, Bryan Fischer and Kevin Sweeney. And we have got a lot of hoops to discuss. We've got Georgia Southern trying to win 6 games in 6 days. We've got half-court shots. We got angry coaches. We've got Danny Hurley getting ejected. Tom Izzo getting snarly after losing to Michigan again. Wild upsets. But before we get into all that, we have to recap the Carnival in Washington, D.C. last Friday. The 4 p.m. Friday meeting, the getaway meeting that nobody really ever takes seriously in any line of work. And I guess that includes the White House and the president, because Donald Trump took everybody for a ride in an attempt to, quote unquote, save college sports. He had 50 people into the White House for less than 2 hours to sit around discussing a topic that we discussed like for hours and hours and hours on end. I don't know whether they came to any better solutions than we have on this podcast, but I guess they tried. This should probably be about 111th on the priority list for things happening in the nation's capital, but whatever, it happened. We had politicians, we had former coaches, had a couple former players, we had a lot of other people there to bloviate. Bryan, if you would, please tell the listeners what this was about, what it wasn't about, and was anything actually saved in college sports?
This was peak. This could have been an email, on Friday. And it also reconfirmed, to me, watching the whole thing and unfortunately getting stuck in, at least time zones. It was not a 4 p.m. on a Friday for me, but it kind of reconfirmed that, everybody in Washington, I don't know how they put up with it. Number one, if you're a media member, but just everybody wants to get their 10 or 15 second clip, for the nightly news back home. Like that was what this was designed to be. This was a photo op to the maximum. And, truthfully, it kind of went better than I thought for maybe until about halfway through, maybe 2/3. Ted Cruz interrupted the president and started going on, and he brought up the no Democrats supporting the Save Act in Congress, and that kind of got everything off the rails. And it was a totally off the rails type of thing after that. And I mean, when Greg Sankey's having to come in and say, well, actually, the Supreme Court weighed 9-0. Against us, and that kind of set us off on this path. That kind of got everything, just a reminder that, this is not an issue that is, I think, as well known, in Washington in terms of some of the details. It certainly reaffirmed to a lot of people out there that, what they want to save is kind of up in the air, and it kind of depends on who you want to ask to. I mean, Urban Meyer's out there spouting off about collectives and saying we got to rein them in and get rid of them. You got Greg Sankey out there talking about trying to save college sports, and Pete Pavakwa, the Notre Dame ADs, out there saying, hey, we got to tie revenue to Olympic sports. It was kind of everybody. Let's read your prepared statement. Get it out there, have your little 10-second clip. But in terms of actual meaningful progress, not much was saved outside of maybe sending a lot of people to some of those bars there in Washington, D.C. afterwards to discuss things.
It sort of strikes me, you've heard the refrain a ton. Oh, like the judges making these decisions on college sports is bad because the judges just don't understand college sports. Like they don't get us. We do things so differently. It doesn't strike me that anyone in Washington really gets it either. And it doesn't seem that there's anyone, again, kind of conveying sort of a unified message of here is what we want, here is what we need. And we talked about this either last week or the week before on the pod. Like at some point, we got to rein in all the competing interests and just settle in on a couple of key issues. If this, Hail Mary to the government is going to work, which by all accounts, it hasn't yet. There's no indication why it would, but presumably the countdown is on to midterm election season, because once that happens, who knows what's getting done in Washington. If that's what's going to happen, the hope needs to be some sort of aligned interest, aligned shared interest. And I had thought maybe this meeting would be that in some sense, and it was anything but. As Bryan said, it was the sampling of whichever core constituency you have to serve. Make your announcement to the president and anyone who listened that it's an important, and then let the president, say his piece about trying to return us to 2019 college sports, the utopia that supposedly was. So yeah, not an overly productive meeting in my estimation. Who knows? Maybe some backroom deals were made afterwards, bar conversations, what have you. But the public version, not encouraging for the future of government intervention in the sport.
Yeah, that one element there that you mentioned was a nice little plot twist of Donald Trump saying, "Gosh, can we just go back to not paying them?" Basically, yeah, he didn't say it quite that explicitly, but like that's one thing that's not happening.
Yeah, maybe we'll throw out. They can have some compensation, right? They can have some.
Right. That's one thing that I am reasonably certain is not happening. The courts have absolutely made that one clear. I agree that again, and we did discuss this a couple of shows ago that we have we just have this shotgun blast of ideas and issues and solutions, and there's no focus. There's not a consensus, and there's not a focus on what needs to be done first. Of any way of actually getting something going. And Bryan, you wrote a column about this about, I think it was last week, about what exactly are they trying to save. There's a lot of things that don't need saving, right? There's a lot of things that are very good right now. In some ways, you could argue that college sports is in a better space than it's been in a long time, if not ever, from the standpoint of the players being compensated fairly, from the standpoint of viewer interest, from the standpoint of largely packed stadiums and arenas. Those things are all good, and those are big things. The issues are whether this is financially sustainable, and the thing that is bothersome to me on that front, and Bryan, you alluded to this in the column as well, the one thing you have, and you've got people at Louisville writing white papers and people elsewhere writing theories and treatises and whatever. The one thing that doesn't seem to even conceivable is cost containment. We don't hear that. We hear, well, to be competitive, we have to spend more money than we have. Really? That doesn't seem like a very good strategy. But that's kind of what people are saying. Is like football and basketball, we just basically have to go blank check. And if that ruins everything else, gosh, that would be a shame. Government, help us. Instead, maybe we could not give completely ridiculous contracts to head coaches. Maybe we don't have staff sizes like a small army. Maybe the athletic department shouldn't be 400 people. There's a lot of areas that I think could be examined for some cost containment. I get it that when push comes to shove, people are going to pay the strength coach a lot of money if you're trying to win in football. And they're going to pay the defensive coordinator, and they're going to pay the head coach, and they're sure going to pay the players. But I think if there were some, I guess, more concrete discussion of cost containment within all of this, it might be a little more palatable to getting to the rest of it. I don't know. Any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, it's funny because you bring up Louisville, right? And they had record revenues, last year. But why did they not turn some massive profit on record revenues? Why? Because they're paying buyouts for coaches. That to me is the one thing. We thought there could be some sort of market correction. All right, NIL is coming into effect, revenue sharing is coming into effect. All right, those are big line items on the budget, right? And it hasn't changed the outlook of college athletics at all. It has not changed the mentality. It's still everybody out there for themselves, and that's competition, which can be a good thing. It's a great thing for athletes right now, right? They can move around. They can leverage other schools into better deals. It's never been better in this era of player empowerment to be one of those players. Not only in terms of your compensation, but everything that goes along with it. But the schools have not adjusted, and it is. And Pat, you and I, we talk with Charlie Baker pretty regularly. I continually ask him, all right, what is the plan, for college athletics if you can't get something done in Washington? Let's face it, outside of this executive order that Donald Trump is supposedly going to come up with this week, and he acknowledges is going to get challenged by the courts right away. There's not really much of a thought in terms of how do we move forward as an enterprise beyond this Hail Mary in Congress, which, let's face it, given everything that's going on in the world, it is not going to happen. And even before getting into the midterms and all that, there's a lot of issues right now in terms of passing anything in Congress, much less something like this that, let's face it, if you were to go to your local representatives or your local senators, they're going to support some sort of congressional reform. But actually getting that over the line is it's just not going to happen at this point. So hopefully this meeting last Friday could at least serve as a wake-up call to the rest of the leaders, whether they were in that room or not, whether they spoke up or not, that we got to do something else. We got to start maybe thinking a little bit harder about collective bargaining. We're going to start thinking about maybe some of those cost containment issues that we were just talking about, because right now the shining white knight is not coming to the rescue of college athletics, and hopefully more people are going to recognize that moving forward after this.
I mean, how about just having a little bit of backbone financially? Like it's the same thing we talked about with coach contracts and whatnot. Like the frightened old AD that's convinced that their coach is going to get stolen from them if they don't give him that nice 7-year contract, right? Or Oregon State is just finally getting out of quote unquote coaching salary cap hell with Wayne Tinkle from the extension that no one needed after the 2021 Elite Eight run, right? And instead of, okay, maybe we need to reevaluate how we do things, we're still doing it. We're still giving out these terrible contracts, and now we're doing it with the players too. Now we're panicked that our left tackle or our backup power forward has an offer on the table, because again, it's one thing if Jimmy Sexton is telling you we need to get this deal done. Now we're getting strong-armed by people who aren't even qualified to be agents. This is where we're at. It is chaos to the max, and an athletic director at some point, someone in the I don't know if it's the coach, I don't know if it's the AD, I don't know if it's the president, it's the board. Someone has to say, like, enough is enough. Like, you got your $10 million, build a basketball roster.
Yeah,
build a good one. Like, it can't just be this constant wave of excuses. Oh, if we get $2 more million, 12 will be 12 will do it. Oh, well, now 14 will do it. Like last spring, I sort of understand how things got absolutely chaotic in the basketball portal, right? There was this kind of doubled effect of rev share plus NIL. Like, if people keep just blowing through budgets over and over again, we're never going to get anywhere, right? And that's on NIL, that's on coaching salaries, that's on athletic department budget. Like, learn how to run a department in the black. Figure out how to run your business like a business. That's the term, right? Everyone wants to talk about, oh, we're gonna professionalize our model. We're gonna build an athletic department that's more like a business. Okay, so start acting like one and stop complaining that, oh, we got strong-armed into paying somebody 3 times more than they're worth. You got to let them walk. That's the reality.
I mean, those are great points, except I fear what the answer to that will be is like, okay, if we're going to run a business, we're getting rid of all our red ink sports, or as many of them as we can. And we have seen just last week, a wrestling program cut, a gymnastics program cut, a couple of weeks ago, a swim program cut. And I fear that's always going to be the answer, or at least as far as they can do it within the bounds of Title IX and within the bounds of having enough programs to be Division I compliant. I guess what's become kind of the existential debate is, well, why should football pay for everything else? Why should football and basketball have to pay for everything else? The fact of the matter is, college sports was not set up to be money-making enterprises. It became that. I get it. But that's always been the case, is that 2 sports make money and the rest of them don't, but they've always had all of them. And I don't see that now just, well, let's just get rid of those sports. First of all, legally hard to do. Secondly, you can go to most campuses and you can have maybe an engineering department or a business school that brings in the most students and thereby the most tuition. It doesn't mean you don't have a sociology department. It doesn't mean you don't have a philosophy department. Those things still exist. That's the way universities work. If somebody wants to completely remake the university model and just say sports are too important, we're going to do it this way. Okay, but I think we're really going pretty far down the field to make sure that the strength coach makes $1 million. One other element of this that struck me, and Brian, you used the term wake-up call. I am wondering if this meeting and the whole dynamic of what led to this might be a bit of a wake-up call for the two guys who have pretty well either tried to take over or been put in charge of college sports. That's Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, commissioners of the SEC and the Big Ten. And I am wondering whether they have lost the plot and lost the room. They have pretty well led the charge, especially Sankey, over the last decade, really, of limiting the NCAA's powers. But the resulting vacuum has not led to any solutions that have stuck from them. The Cody Campbell Smash Capital, pool the media rights group that has kind of risen up as a challenge to the status quo has not been subdued. That's really, I think, what's driving a lot of the current discussion is this kind of a Big 12 led to a degree push to diversify or to pool all the media rights and to kind of put everybody on the same playing field, at least in the power conferences, more or less. Beyond that, the SEC and Big Ten, they were put in charge of the football playoff by their own strong arming. They haven't been able to agree on a format. SEC members are unhappy about playing 9 football games, but not having a 16-team playoff. Big Ten members and, importantly, Fox are not happy about Petitti failing to deliver a 24-team model. So there's a lot going on that I think is causing people to question Sankey and Petitti here. For a long time, Sankey was unquestionable. Like, he was the guy, the most powerful person in college sports, and I think he had broad support across Division I and certainly within his own conference. Now I'm looking at all this and starting to wonder if there are a little bit of cracks in the foundation of his support, and by extension, Petitti's, who I don't even think likes college sports. So I'm wondering, what am I overestimating the potential? I don't know about danger, but the headwinds that these guys are now flying into. What do you think?
Well, I think you look at really the job that they have now is certainly more difficult than even when they first took it, and even going back with Tony Petitti just a couple of years ago. Like, you look at these schools themselves, they're listening to the conference office a lot less. They're listening. They're a little bit more independent, I think, than they ever have. Whether that's the coaches, whether that's the ADs, whether that's school leadership, even. I mean, you used to talk about, oh, we have a great group of presidents, and they're really understanding. Well, those presidents are spending more time on college athletics than they ever have been. They've been in meetings with boosters about college athletics more than they ever have been. And guess what? That comes with it much more local focus, much more about me and not us. And I think that has been probably their biggest challenge, not only right now, but moving forward, is getting that everybody kind of pulling in the same direction. It's certainly something that Greg Sankey has had to deal with over his much longer tenure. And they're certainly facing those headwinds, as you mentioned, in terms of just broader college athletics. And I think it almost is a job that is a no-win situation at this point, because they certainly have to look out for their own leagues. They're right now they're leading the charge as the power 2. They got more money than everybody else, but with more money comes more problems. And I think they've understand they're going to have to take some slings and arrows moving forward, no matter what. If they're going to kind of get college athletics a little bit more over the line than it has been.
It strikes me that, like, there's a feeling that, okay, well, like a rising tide should lift all boats with college sports, but also like, I think nobody agrees which boat should be in the water to rise, right? Like at some
Pretty good
point, like,
analogy, Kevin.
Yeah.
like the SEC wants to raise itself up, but then inside of the SEC, well, why should Alabama have to lift up Mississippi State? Like at its core, all of these conversations, right? Whether it's why should football pay for gymnastics? Why should Alabama pay for Mississippi State? Why should Ohio State pay for Northwestern? Right? Why should the SEC pay for the Big 12? Why should the Big 12 pay for the Horizon League? Right? At its core, like that's what all of this is. Why should we be footing the bill? And I guess where I wish everyone would come together, and I don't know who the leader is on this. I don't know if it's, like I think Petiti and Sankey are probably ill-equipped to be that now, because at its core, like they've been driving the bus for the top 1%, if you will. So why are they now the common man's advocate? Like it's just never going to work. I guess where I'm struggling is like someone needs to shake everybody free and say, look, like a 30-team college football super league, if this is where some people envision it heading one day, may be good for a small portion of this enterprise. It's not going to be good for the vast majority of it. And it's not going to be good for, I think, even those 30 long-term. And I think the sooner everybody can like shake themselves into believing that and understanding like there is a valuable enterprise here for all of us, and we can all win if we work together, the better. Now, again, how does that work? Is it pooled TV rights? I don't know. I'm not the expert there. But I do know that like at some point we probably need to stop being so individualistic and start realizing like this is big business for all of us if we just handle it right. And I'm just not sure who's the voice that's going to make sure everybody does.
Well, that's the multi-billion-dollar question. And I think Sankey at least understands that and he can see the cliff ahead and say, we cannot drive off the cliff and go become a 30-team or 40-team super league. We can't. It's not going to, it'll destroy everything. Petiti, I don't think he cares. But how do you avoid going to the cliff? I don't know. It's astounding to me that we're in this position. But the point I guess I come back to with these guys, these conferences wanted control, they took control, and they haven't done anything with their control other than continue this churn of uncertainty and disagreement and everybody for themselves.
Well, and part of the issue too, really in the last kind of 2 decades of college athletics, the tail has been wagging the dog in terms of the TV networks, and I think that has also been part of the problem. I mean, Eric Shanks was in that room, smiling, the president of CEO of Fox Sports, that if that doesn't tell you about kind of the state of college athletics right now, I don't know what else does. I think that
in the room too.
He was definitely invited. I don't know if I remember seeing him, but
yeah.
It's notable certainly that you do have kind of these two competing interests in terms of Fox and the Big Ten very much tied together. I mean, Fox literally owns the grant of rights to the conference. You have the SEC tied in for many more years with ESPN and ABC, and that's been a fruitful relationship for both, and it's led to all these record revenues. But you know what? There's some to-do list on behalf of the TV networks, and that's where we've had this conflict. And maybe if they would, going back to Kevin's earlier point, if they would have a little bit more of a backbone to start saying no, and whether that cost them $1 million or $2 million per school down the road in some 2032 negotiation, who knows? But I don't think anybody is stepping away from the table saying, hey, college athletics is going to get less interesting. It's going to get less valuable. I think everybody understands this is still, the second most popular sport in the country. It's second biggest entity behind the NFL at this point. And it's only going to continue to grow. We've seen that in the interest level, and hopefully somebody will start standing up for college athletics. But I'm not convinced in the near future that that's going to be the case, where everybody kind of puts the greater interest ahead of their own.
Everybody is so scared of a small defeat on the way to a larger victory. If we lose this player, it's over. If we lose that $1 million, it's over. The panic level continues to drive everything. All right, enough about that. Bryan, you said executive order hoped for. We'll see. what could it do? What is next? What's coming out of this meeting? Is there anything we can actually expect?
Well, you did hear, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, certainly the Republican leader as well, say they're going to go back and look at the SCORE Act. There's also the SAVE Act out there that's well. There's only one Democrat involved in this, and Lori Trahan, who's been pretty outspoken on the issue. So we'll see if there's any across the aisle, conversations. There was a bill, from Senator Cantwell, Senator Schmidt that came out as well, kind of looking to amend the Sports Business or Sports Broadcasting Act, and maybe there's some movement on that. But again, it's about focus. That's the thing that's involved in all this. You got certainly the executive branch wanting to put out an executive order that's likely to be challenged by the courts. You got Congress trying to not trip over itself. In terms of what's actually going to happen, I don't expect much. I think it will kind of shape some of the conversations moving forward. It's going to be interesting, here in a couple of months over the summer, during NACTA, when a lot of the athletic directors meet, how much more conversation is there going to be about, hey, maybe we should do collective bargaining for football and men's basketball players. Maybe there's something that needs to be done internally with the conferences. Maybe we kind of heard Jerry Moorhead, the Georgia president, say maybe the SEC is not going to start creating more rules that apply just to our university. We could start to see maybe some progress on those fronts. But in terms of actually big holistic changes, I'm not expecting much to come out of this. I don't think anybody else involved in college athletics is either. But hey, everybody got their nice 30 seconds of speaking for the TV news. And hey, here's March Madness. Let's move forward.
Yeah, let's move this podcast forward to March Madness. All right. We will have plenty of time through the offseason to discuss the trials and tribulations of college sports as a whole. But right now, right here, second week of conference tournaments, the big tournaments get going. It's fantastic. But first, it's also firing season, soon to be followed by hiring season. 4 power conference coaches have been fired or reportedly fired thus far. Here is the list. Earl Grant at Boston College, Damon Stoudemire at Georgia Tech, Kim English at Providence, Jerome Tang at Kansas State. What do they all have in common? They're all black coaches. The number of black head coaches in power conferences was already a rather low percentage. It was 19%. It stands to be significantly reduced when those jobs are filled, quite likely by white coaches. Amongst the other, I believe it's 11 coaches who have been fired, 4 other black coaches gone. All these guys were losing on a case-by-case basis. You can go through and say, yeah, I get it. The larger picture is at the very least noteworthy in a sport that is played largely by black athletes at the highest level. It is largely coached by white people, and it's going to be that percentage is going to skew even more out of this. Kevin, coincidence or a problem? How do you view this?
I think it's something in the middle. That's sort of a cop-out. I do think it's concerning. What I would say is this. I think in the post-2020 climate, there was a significant push to diversify your searches, if nothing else. Like talk to candidates from every background, et cetera. And I think that was successful in a lot of fronts. And I think over the last couple of years, what has really swung back in the pendulum is this idea of like head coaching experience. Every hire needs head coaching experience, right? And maybe some of that's like a Signetti factor and some of the other guys that have done a good job that have climbed their way up the ranks slowly but surely at lower levels. Some of that's probably a swing back in terms of, like we'll use K-State with Tang as an example, first-time head coach, seemingly in over his head in a lot of respects, especially over the last couple of years. But what I would say is, like, particularly in this environment where top assistants at high major schools, big programs, make so much money, right? $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Kamani Young at UConn, who's well overdue to be head coach, makes over $1 million. Like, those guys have priced themselves out of being mid-major head coaches now, right? Those jobs, the first job that you usually get as even a great assistant like Kamani or something like, those are jobs that don't often pay $1 million. They don't. So you're given this choice of take a pay cut or stick it out, keep being an assistant. And I think, unfortunately, what that's created is we have a great group of really good high major assistants, but they're not necessarily primed to take some of the jobs that they can get. And the pool of jobs that would actually hire them with that money is very small, right? There might be a couple high majors that would consider straight assistant, or even the Atlantic 10, Mountain West, jobs like that do pay $1 million, that do have real resources, et cetera. I think that's the real challenging thing. And I know, Pat, we talked about, a couple of the really good coaches who've clinched bids already. Nolan Smith, first year at Tennessee State, doing a phenomenal job. Rod Strickland had to build this thing up at LIU. It was shaky early. They're dancing now. But those guys took jobs that not everybody would take, particularly in Nolan's case. Nolan's career, I think if you had told Nolan Smith a few years ago that he would be the head coach at Tennessee State, he probably wouldn't have believed you. Yeah. Right? His career had to hit some bumps to get to a point where he's taking a Tennessee State. The Louisville debacle with Kenny Payne. And so I think it's a real concern that some of these searches feel very sort of preordained, and there isn't a lot of room for outside candidates. Once the job actually opens, more and more seems done before it ever opens. But I think that prevents us from talking to maybe an intriguing assistant or someone like that. But I do think, the core of this is sort of this push for head coaching experience. And quite frankly, it's trickling down from these elite assistants. They're not taking those opportunities anymore. And because of that, now what's next? And that's the concerning thing. So I do think 100% it's a problem, but I don't know if it stems from, more of a sea change as much as it's just the direction of how these searches are being wired in the 2026 college basketball and college football as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of individual issues that you can definitely see cropping up. I mean, Earl Grant, that's a no-win situation there at Boston College in terms of resources provided to the program. Certainly Damon Stoudemire, the way he went about building the roster. All right, that was obviously flawed, and it kind of came back to bite them. In the end there at Georgia Tech, and you can see a lot of those kind of individual situations and make sense of them, but there's still those macro trends that those all add up to. I mean, we're even seeing in the NFL. I mean, that was certainly a topic of conversation in the NFL coaching cycle, which was very active. A lot of the jobs that came open, nearly a third of the league, and the lack of black hires. I mean, that was something that was brought up by a number of people. And that's something that there are rules in place, obviously, at the league level to interview minority coaches and get more people into the rooms and get that more exposure. And there's not that, number one, at the college level. And I think more to the point, you talk about some of these searches, it's an issue. I think for whether you're a young African-American assistant coach or a head coach, just being in the room with donors, with athletic directors that are, different. And you're going to have to ask them for money. Like that could be a difficult task in general for a lot of people, but it's even more so nowadays, because if you're a head coach, whether you're at a high major program, whether you're at a power program, you're having to fight for your program in terms of resources in the sport of men's basketball, and going into those rooms, hitting up donors, going to those cocktail parties, being lively. Sometimes that's just a difficult task for a lot of these guys. And it's easy for a lot of these athletic directors, for these search firms, to kind of just default to saying, all right, well, we know this guy, he will work, it'll fit the bill and maybe we can win. And I think that's something that college athletics is grappling with and in general, but moving forward, I think it's definitely going to be something to kind of keep an eye on with this coaching style, especially because it's not going to be quite as crazy as we kind of expect it to be compared to like football or even the NFL recently.
Good stuff, guys. And then I appreciate a little bit of nuance being applied there, especially by Kevin on this, in terms of there are good high major assistant black coaches who aren't going to stick their neck out and take a bad job. At the catch-22 is, if you don't have experience, what are you going to get? So that adds a little more layer to the discussion. I said I think you can look at all of these and certainly justify them, but I also know the math is this. I mean, Jerome Tang was in his fourth season, a winning percentage of .555. Recent coaches at K-State, Jim Wooldridge, .480, Tom Asbury, .491. They both got 6 years. They got a little longer leash. At Georgia Tech, 3 years and out for Damon Stoudemire. I thought it was a weird hire to begin with. Never fit, didn't work. Brian Gregory got 5 seasons despite an overall losing record. Josh Pastner got 7 despite an overall losing record. To Brian's point, if anybody tries to hire you as a revenue coach, a revenue sport coach at Boston College, just say no. It's not going to work. Providence, Kim English, he was hired at age 33. I still think Kim English can be a very successful coach. I just wonder if it was too fast, too soon. There's not a lot of 33-year-old head coaches out there. He went quickly from George Mason to Providence. Now I'm a little bit, concerned or watching what's going to happen with Adrian Autry at Syracuse, Jeff Capel, Pittsburgh, Lamont Paris, South Carolina, Micah Shrewsbury, Notre Dame. Again, it's a small percentage of coaches in the power conferences, black coaches that have these jobs, and it could be drastically reduced. I'm not saying anybody's is performing, racial discrimination. I'm just saying the overall picture is of concern. And when the coaches all get together at the NABC convention in Indy at the Final Four, this has got to be a topic, right? This has got to be something they discuss and hey, what's not working for a significant portion of our membership? So we'll see where the issue goes. But for now, something to keep an eye on as the coaching carousel turns. Couple other things here, tournament-wise. 3 mid-major top seeds have lost before even reaching the semifinals of their tournament in a one-bid league. Basically, they have nuked their own best teams. Belmont in the Missouri Valley, Navy in the Patriot League, UNC Wilmington in the CAA, all lost in the quarterfinals as number 1 seeds playing 8 or 9s. Are they doing it wrong in terms of protecting their best teams in those leagues? Should they go to a Sun Belt flock of geese bracket where they only have to play twice to get the bid? Or is this the part of the flavor of March? And what makes it interesting is everybody gets their chance, and some of them maximize it, some of them flop. Kevin, what do you think about this?
I've looked a lot at this over the years, and it doesn't feel to me as though any bracket model, at least in single elimination basketball, has magically protected the 1 seed. So I'm sort of inclined to just say let's treat it like a bracket. Let's treat it like March Madness. Let's go play. You go in your 3 games in 3 days. As frustrating as it is for a team like Belmont, I was there as they came crashing out of the Valley tournament to Drake. I mean, Drake entered the Valley tournament having lost 9 in a row and put a absolute beating on a Belmont team that was incredible. I think Belmont could have won 2 games in the NCAA tournament. They were that good, and you're judged by your worst day in this sport. It's the reality of it. What I would say is this: I would be increasingly open to what models you could take that are more drastic than simply the Sun Belt stairway to 7 or something like that, right? Double elimination. Would that work?
Yeah.
I would be intrigued by, I saw someone propose this, and I apologize to whoever on Twitter I'm stealing this idea from. The conference tournament gets played out, and if the 1 seed loses, the 1 seed then hosts the conference tournament champion for the automatic bid. And you play a home game, and if you get the 1 seed, then you also get a chance to make a little extra revenue. I'm intrigued by some ideas like that long term, but at its core, I don't think these leagues actually care that much about sending their best. I think they would like to. The Missouri Valley would certainly prefer if the 26-5 Belmont team gets to go instead of the 6 seed Northern Iowa. Although I will say Northern Iowa is really, really good. Yeah. But at the end of the day, the event exists for television and for people to buy tickets to the conference tournament. It's an entertainment product. It's not a best team wins situation. If it was, we wouldn't have these things at all.
Well, there have been a lot of good teams. To be fair, High Point was the number 1 seed. Tennessee State was the number 1 seed. LIU was the number 1 seed. North Dakota State was the number 1 seed, and that's just of the recent automatic qualifiers that we got through the weekend. So there have been some top teams. Northern Iowa is definitely the outlier in this situation. But I mean, the format of conference tournaments, that has been discussed in spring meetings and conference meetings, I think from the beginning of time. I think there is that kind of navigation between, yes, you do want to protect whoever made it through the gauntlet of the regular season and had the best year and maybe has that best chance to earn some tournament units, more importantly, for a lot of these leagues that subsist on that. If you're in the MAC, not the MAC, the MAAC, if you go on one of those crazy runs where you're getting multiple tournament units, that can fuel additional staff members for the conference office. It can fuel, increases in revenue that can go back to the athletes in terms of putting on championships and being in better spots. And you understand that balance with also, hey, it's can be difficult at times for one team, to shoot 2 of 20 from the field, for a stretch. And that just completely tanks their situation. I mean, it's kind of just inherent in the sport of basketball that you do kind of get that randomness from a lot of these conference tournaments. And frankly, I will expect some conferences to maybe start exploring some of those more outlandish ideas, because what do they got to lose at this point? I think they are going to start to say, hey, maybe it does make more sense from an investment standpoint to more protect some of those top seeds moving forward, given how important earning those tournament revenues are moving forward.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I feel like it's a little bit of an overreaction, as you said, Brian. We're talking about 3 so far. There will assuredly be some others, but 3 champions. And the problem is 2 of them just completely punked out. Belmont and Wilmington just got destroyed. And the CAA is hilarious. Wilmington got destroyed, opening everything wide up for Charleston, who then got beat worse, lost by 25. Those 2 teams were head and shoulders above. I guess Hofstra was close. And it's like they both just absolutely cratered at the wrong time. Navy, I feel bad they lost on a 40-foot shot, but they also barely won their first round game. So, this is the fiber of tournament basketball, is you have to show up in March. Everything before that is prelude. It's tough, but this is when it matters, and everybody knows the rules of engagement going in. So I kind of lean them back on saying I like the madness that we get. All right, speaking of madness, we had a lot of people extremely mad about Miami of Ohio possibly being an at-large team with a bad schedule. Well, guess what? That's no longer an issue. Miami of Ohio is 31-0, and there ain't no way they are missing the field even if they lose in the MAC tournament, which I think they might lose in the MAC tournament because they have been playing with fire for weeks. But which high major at-large team would you least like to see sneak in, and why is it Auburn? Never mind. Sorry, I don't mean to prejudice anybody here. It's Auburn for me. But Brian, tell me which bubble team really has no business being in this tournament unless they win an automatic bid this week.
Well, hey, at least Bruce Pearl is softened his stance, and he's rooting for 2 MAC teams now. So, we can clear that up a little bit on the Auburn front. Maybe Auburn. Yeah, I mean, that's one of them. I mean, it isn't so reflective of why we can't expand this tournament, because the bubble this year has just completely lost track of what they're capable of doing. I mean, it seems like every single team just this past weekend was like, all right, they're on the bubble. They're the last 4 in, they're the last 4 out. Boom, loss, boom, loss. Frankly, I don't want to see any of them. I would much rather see, a New Mexico out there out of the Mountain West. Some of these other mid-major schools. Hopefully Santa Clara has maybe played their way firmly into the field. We'll see if that results in a trip to Dayton. But I mean, Missouri has backslid. They had that perfect opportunity there against Arkansas and just completely let go of it down the stretch there and in overtime. I mean, NC State has backed their way into certainly the bubble talk after losing their last couple of games. I don't want to see SMU. Indiana's out there. It's like, ugh, like what have they really done? Yes, some of the metrics are saying that they should be in that bubble conversation. Hopefully USC has played their way, firmly out of the conversation to where we don't even have to discuss them being a potential bubble team. But it's just reflective of how flattened the sport is kind of at this level, where we are talking about so many of these teams and we don't want to see any of them. Skip over these guys. I'd rather see Duke bludgeon a top 16 team rather than suffer through some of these teams playing in Dayton. And that's just where I'm at. It's probably the state of these coaches and where they got these programs, but I don't want to see any of these bubble teams necessarily end up making the field.
I'll give you an easy sort of metric that should be an eliminator, right? I know people love to say, oh, if you're under 500 in your conference, you should be out. I don't like that personally. I think it's a little too complicated, league strength, et cetera, especially now with the unbalanced schedules, right? It just seems unfair to me to draw that line. But I do think there's a less arbitrary line that should be very clear. Quad 1 games, quad 2 games, quad 3 games, tally them up. If you're not over 500 in those games, you have zero business in this tournament. Right? If all you've done is pad your record with quad 4s, you don't belong here. There's 3 serious bubble teams, right? Cincinnati's below this mark, Baylor, which is still somehow sort of halfway hovering, Oklahoma as well. But there's 3 like serious contenders that are below this mark. So first we have Indiana. Indiana is 11-13 in quad 1+3.
Yeah.
Texas is 10-13 in quad 1, 2, and 3. And then finally, as we've talked about Auburn is 10-15 against the top 3 quadrants. I understand that not every game is created equal, and I respect Auburn for challenging itself ridiculously in the non-conference, right? I think if Auburn had done the bare minimum, they would be in this tournament, but they haven't. You have at some point, like, winning the games has to matter. And as you said, like, I just don't think these teams who have been given chance after chance are deserving entrance into this event, right? And we just talked about Belmont. Like, you're judged by your worst day. Belmont's a damn good basketball team, right? Why can't we give Belmont a shot in Dayton because they had one really bad day, right? Isn't that what a first 4 should be for, right? A team like that, not a team that got 15 chances and took advantage of 5 of them. So look, it's frustrating. And look, I'm sure that after this, we'll still get expansion conversations. We'll still get the push, and they'll say, "Oh, well, maybe there'd be room for Belmont if we expanded that tournament. It maybe just we get 8 more spots." And somehow I have a feeling that we'd instead be talking ourselves into Virginia Tech and Oklahoma, not the Bruins.
That's it. The 8 more spots, at least 6 of them are going to the power conference teams that we have, I think you said, have chance after chance after chance and lose most of them. And that's what just is maddening to me. Expanding the tournament with this bunch would make for some truly terrible viewing experiences. That's for sure. And it wouldn't make for enough revenue to make that work. So, all right. We'll try to pick up the pace here. We got a couple more things to get to, but again, high major tournaments starting this week. They're all going to be really interesting. Give me one that you're particularly fired up to see and why, Kevin?
I'm probably most intrigued by the Big 12 tournament, just in the sense of like some teams that I think still have a lot to prove heading into the tournament. Iowa State has sort of limped to the finish. BYU certainly has, but then gets the big win over Texas Tech. I think we're still learning a little bit about the Red Raiders without JT Toppin. The Kansas with Peterson and what does that look like? They stumbled there last week, and then Darren had his best game in quite some time over Kansas State. And then you have this kind of surging bubble Cincinnati team that took a step back against TCU over the weekend, but like is playing like a tournament team. They're the rare sort of like, I actually wouldn't mind seeing this current version of the Bearcats in the NCAA tournament. And so, yeah, let's see what they could do. Let's see if they could make a run. I think that will be a compelling one for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely a little bit jealous of Pat, just in terms of the talent level there in Kansas City. I mean, that is reason why the NBA scouts are flocking to the Big 12 tournament alone. Just the level of guys, especially in the freshman class alone, that you're going to be able to see there play some meaningful games, and going to be meaningful for a lot of those seeding purposes, as well as some of the bubble teams. And like you mentioned with Cincinnati, maybe even TCU in terms of where they might end up geographically. And, to me, that does probably is the most interesting of tournaments. I don't think there's much intrigue in the Big Ten outside of maybe if Michigan can keep this thing going. They're not going to lose a number 1 seed if they go out early. Maybe it's a more faith in Illinois if they were to somehow sneak out of there with a win in Chicago. I'm intrigued a little bit with the ACC tournament where I'll be at just in terms of the bubble positioning for a lot of those teams. I mean, a team like Stanford has suddenly kind of surged into the conversation now. And I do think Kyle Smith has them playing well at the right time of the year. We'll see if certainly Cameron Boozer can maybe cap off maybe the greatest regular season that any freshman has ever had in college basketball, if he's able to kind of continue his pace there in Charlotte. I would throw out there, though, that I do think it's going to be interesting too, at the same time that all of these tournaments are going on. I mean, there's definitely the potential for some bid thieves out of the Mountain West, right? Some of those other tournaments that are going on at the same time maybe get lost in the shuffle a little bit. I think there could be some very much some intrigue, especially as the committee goes into their meetings on Wednesday, about maybe the stakes are a little bit raised in some of these high major tournaments too.
By the way, I wouldn't be shocked if there's a Big East bid stealer, or at least one
True.
playing for one on Saturday, which is partially because you only have 3 locks. There's a pretty good chance you pull one upset, you're there. But like Marquette just beat UConn. UConn looks vulnerable-ish at the moment. I don't know who it would be. Maybe it's Seton Hall. Maybe it's Marquette. Honestly, Marquette has played better of late. Nigel James, the freshman point guard's a stud. So I do think the energy at the Garden, if there's a chance for a 3 games in 3 days or 4 games in 4 days run to the dance will be pretty cool. I'm not saying the whole tournament will be great, but maybe that Saturday could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Big East and specifically Marquette, which has just had a disastrous season. But you beat UConn to close it. You've won 3 of your last 4. You get a number 7 seed. Could some stuff happen? I don't know. I mean, Rick Pitino's an unbelievable tournament coach, and he'd be in your way if you get that far. I'm sorry. It'll be UConn again. Because UConn is the number 2 seed. St. John's is actually the number 1, ended up winning the league. But still, I am a little bit intrigued there. It's nice to see DePaul not be completely horrific, even if they are playing in their traditional Wednesday first-round game. Seton Hall, you mentioned, could they just scrape and fight and claw their way back into the bubble conversation? Is this it for Greg McDermott at Creighton? Is he still going to keep going after this season? Could he go out with a bang there that maybe elevates them into the tournament? I don't know. So I always love watching the Big East tournament just for the energy in the Garden, which I know everybody talks about, but if you're there and you see it, man, it's a really cool thing. And then just the ferocity with which they end up playing. It just, like, as that tournament goes on, it just becomes a street fight. It's like, all right, we got contact, and then we got a lot of contact, and then we just have a street brawl by the final. And that's just the way the Big East has always been, and that's part and parcel of it. So lots of good basketball to watch everywhere. One thing we are not watching, senior day with guys that have been at the same school for 4 years or 5 years. According to Isaac Trotter, 24/7 Sports, great stat here, 22 scholarship players went through senior day at the same school where they started in the high major leagues. That is an incredibly small number. It clearly is indicative of the transfer culture that we live in. Is it like the sign of the end times, or what do we think? Brian, quickly on this one here.
Much more the sign of the times. And I was also kind of thinking about this stat, in relation to Bruce Thornton setting the all-time scoring record at Ohio State. Like, is he the last Power 5 guy that's going to end up doing that? Because either you're going straight to the pros, after a way stop, or you're probably transferring a couple of times, right? So I think it's certainly just the nature of the game, and nobody moves around more than college basketball players, even before the one-time transfer exception went away. But it has really been the case now for the entire sport. So definitely the last of the dying breed, and so at least they have those plaques, that they can hang up on the wall for their 1-year stop, or maybe it's 6 or 8 months in one of these places.
Yeah, I know Mick Cronin press conferences are becoming a bit of a joke, but he actually made a pretty good point in one of them recently about creating some system sort of like NBA bird rights, where there's an incentive to come back, right? There's an incentive to stay, right? We should be thrilled about the idea of Bruce Thornton doing what he's done. We should be thrilled about the concept that maybe Alex Condon could be a 4-year Florida Gator and win a championship and come back and keep going. Right? Things like those stories should be celebrated. Those stories should be incentivized financially, both for your team's salary cap and maybe for the player as well. So I think we do. I know there's a lot of work that needs to get done legislatively to make that a reality, whether that's collective bargaining. Gets back to all the conversations we had at the beginning of the show. But I do think it to me, it's a very concerning stat, because like it's hard to expect fans to be as in the weeds as I am hunting the portal. And like that stuff that I can spend all day on, it's not realistic to expect the average Joe. And if we want the average Joe to care about the sport throughout the season and throughout the offseason as well, we need to find a way to make the best players not only want to stay in college, but stay at their school for as long as possible.
Yeah, you're inviting fans to check out because they're just not going to be interested in the constant churn roster. A percentage of them will be, but a lot of them will be like, no, I don't really need this. The NBA actually has more permanence. If I want to watch basketball, I'll watch that. It's better basketball. And I go back on this point to something Matt Painter said at the Final Four a couple of years ago, which is lost on a lot of people is, like at Purdue, a place where they have a huge fan base that cares and is loyal. And if you're loyal back, if you're there 4 years, you could average 7 points a game for 4 years. You could average less. Somebody is going to want to take care of you afterwards. They're going to want to give you a job. You're going to work in medical sales or something at Eli Lilly in Indianapolis because a Purdue booster said, that guy came to our school and stayed and was a good egg, and we're going to reward him. The amount of opportunities that can come to you if you stay put at a school, that if you go to 4 different schools, I did a story in the summer about the kind of the transfer culture and talked about AJ Storr, who's 4 schools in 4 years, or actually going to high schools, 8 schools in 8 years or whatever. And I don't want to make him a piñata in this, but the question that I kept being asked, and not just regarding him, but players in general, like, what letter jacket do you wear after college? Where do you go to homecoming? Who are your friends? If you change your friend base every single year, when you're 30, or who do you talk to? Just a lot of quality of life kind of things that I think can be lost by continually moving around, that are part and parcel of this, not to mention the ability to get a degree. So, that's the nature of what we're in right now. I don't think it's a good thing. I don't know whether it's the end of the world, but it's a concern at the very least. All right, gentlemen, let's wrap up with this. We got a March Madness story of a different kind. We're dropping down a level. We are going to Indiana high school basketball and a young man named Hunter Abner. Producer Kent, I believe we've got some video from Hunter Abner playing for the Bloomfield Cardinals in the sectional tournament over the weekend. Can you play it for us?
It feels great, man. We've been working for 4 years towards this one total goal. It's to win sectional 37. And I know coming to that second quarter I had to step up. Ishmael's huge. All credit to him. He's a great center. But I knew I had to come in here and do what I needed to do to win this ball game. And I'm just so emotional. I'm so happy. It's great. I love it. We've been waiting 4 years, man.
That is tremendous. Please watch the video. Check our YouTube feed. Watch the video of this because you got to see Hunter Abner in action. This guy, backup post player for Bloomfield. I found on Max Preps him listed as 6'1", 280. And that looks about right. And Bloomfield, I don't think, has football. This is small school. I'm going to give you way too much Indiana high school background here in a minute. But came off the bench. He is a husky lad. Let's say that. He is a husky young man. He has a massive, chin beard, lumberjack look. And this is high school basketball. And if you can do it in Indiana, it's even better. To come in off the bench and hit 3 threes and help keep your team from being eliminated and advance in the Indiana high school state tournament. I love Hunter Abner. Is he the greatest living American or just in the top 5, guys?
He's up there, I guess, at least for this week. I'm a little disappointed though. I sent it to the group chat. There was a donkey that escaped and was running around, as part of, searching for his girlfriend. So I thought that was going to be the story this week, but Hunter Abner,
I forgot about that.
For sure. Part of everything that is great about that Indiana State tournament, and man, they were leaving him wide open. If you check the video, they were leaving him wide open, and
they did not believe in Hunter's range.
No, but you know what? He knocked him down. Credit to him. You know what? He's showing the range. So I got to give credit where credit's due.
So my angle to this is that I'm now a big fan of, if you heard in the video, he referenced Ishmael as a great center. So Ishmael is the center for the opposing team, who is a sophomore in high school. Ishmael Kiteka. I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong. I apologize to Ishmael in advance. He is 6'10", 225 pounds. I hope his career takes off. I hope this guy is a McDonald's All-American. I hope he is an NBA player. And then we can pull the video of this in 5-10 years and say Hunter Abner got the best of Ishmael that day.
Hey, he could be his manager down there.
280. Hunter Abner shot him out of the tournament. Oh, it's too good. So, look, let me give you a picture of where Bloomfield, Indiana is. It's in Greene County in southern Indiana, which is actually the home county of Dusty May, by the way. But Bloomfield, small school, 350 kids. Back 1,000 years ago when I covered Indiana high schools, it was smaller than that. Also, back when I covered Indiana high schools, it was single-class basketball. They've ruined that. There are now 4 classes, I think, at least. It should always be single-class. Bloomfield was a good program then. It is located between Switz City and Cincinnati, Indiana. It is not far from Popcorn, Indiana, not far from Hoosier, Indiana. It's out there, and that is hardcore where they're at. They advance now to play in the regional in Washington, Indiana, in the Hatchet House, which is one of the fabled gymnasiums in Indiana. Seats like 7,900 in the town of Washington, Indiana. Old, historic. You walk in there, you're like, oh, all right, this is why they made the movie, right? I mean, it is archetypal Indiana high school stuff. So things like this pop up, and I'm sorry, I tend to lose my mind with romanticism for Indiana high school basketball, but I think Hunter Abner's worth it. You watch that guy. I can't wait. I want to see the clips. I want to see him come off the bench and light it up in the Hatchet House and see if Bloomfield can continue to advance further. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on all the basketball. Keep an eye on the White House executive orders. Thank you all for listening. Please subscribe, give us a good rating, watch the YouTube video, and we will talk to you again. Selection Sunday night. We will have a reaction show after the bracket comes out. Talk to you all later.